So the name Jeep Avenger, that's an exciting name, isn't it? Jeep conjures up images of plucky soldiers bouncing along rough tracks, or perhaps off-road enthusiasts tackling crazy rock climbs. And Avenger, well, that's quite superhero-y, isn't it? Or if you're a bit older and slightly less young, it might remind you of this. The question is whether the new Jeep Avenger is as exciting as the name might suggest. And unfortunately it isn't, because it is another small SUV in a crowded market full of other small SUVs. And yet there is something fun and funky about the Jeep Avenger. While many other small SUVs can seem a bit awkward and contrived, we're looking at you, Ford Puma and Nissan Juke. The Avenger's chunky styling really does make it seem like a proper off-roader. That's all the more impressive when you consider that Jeep is part of the Stellantis group, which means it's had to use the same bag of parts as the Vauxhall Mocha, Peugeot 2008, Citroën C3 Aircross and Alfa Romeo Junior. So it's quite a feat that the design team has made it so distinctive. The designers have had a bit of fun with the Avenger too, because as well as classic Jeep styling cues, such as the squared off wheel arches and 7-bar grille, there's also a silhouette of the grille and headlamps stamped in the brake lights, on the wheels, in the boot and even inside the grille itself. Very meta. There's also this image of a young boy staring through a telescope at the stars, which represents the designer's son. That is really cute. Now, aside from hidden gems and Easter eggs, what do you get with your Avenger? Well, you don't get four-wheel drive, although we are promised that that will come. What you do get is a choice between fully electric, hybrid and petrol powertrains. The electric one gets you 248 miles official range, which is about 210 real world, and 156 horsepower, while the hybrid is more like a mild hybrid, and that has 100 horsepower and an automatic gearbox. And this one is a 1.2 petrol, also has 100 horsepower and a manual gearbox. Climb inside and first impressions are pretty good. Apart from the screen, that does feel like a bit of an afterthought, and there's quite a lot of hard, scratchy plastic, which is a little bit cheap feeling. That said, we can appreciate this ledge here. That is quite off-roady, vehicle-like, so I quite like that. I'm just going to put a few bananas there. And the seats are comfortable, and there is plenty of adjustment in them, and the steering wheel, so you should be able to find a comfortable driving position. No, I need to do a bit more adjustment there, don't I? Maybe it's my seat. You can find a comfortable driving position. Yeah. There's no questioning the usability and effectiveness of this touchscreen though. It's responsive with sharp graphics, a decent quality reversing camera image, as well as standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We also like the fact that there is a row of shortcut buttons down here for the climate controls, and they're really easy to hit on the move, so big plus point there. And the home button is in a slightly unusual place, and it's not backlit like these buttons are down here, but once you know it's there, it's easy to hit. Generally, there is plenty of storage in here, and actually a little bit more than you would expect for a car like this, because cars in this segment that are petrol don't normally come with two big central storages there. So there's a bit of a nod to the Jeep's utilitarian heritage, as is this shelf that I mentioned earlier. There is also a sliding armrest, which is great for those of you who sit a little further away from the steering wheel, such as Tim, but I don't think you need to be quite as tall as Tim to benefit from that. And this being a manual doesn't have it, but in the automatic, this isn't here, and there's a bit of a flappy cover that goes across this storage here, and if you get it wrong, it interferes with the drive selector button, so that's a little bit annoying, but thankfully, this being the manual, doesn't have that. And there's more storage here, so I'm just going to put a banana in there, of course, or maybe 2 or 3, 4. Okay, we're going a bit banana crazy now. Oh no, are we really? The glove box is not particularly big because, being a Stellantis car, they don't want to move the fuse box for whatever reason, so it is the size that it is. but we have this shelf, which I've mentioned now 3 times because I really like it. And there's also a little bit of storage over here as well. At just over 4 metres long, the Avenger is basically Fiesta sized, which means it's not particularly spacious for really tall people like Tim, but for 5'4.5" me, I'm finding it very comfortable. And actually, you'd have to be really quite tall to find it squishy because the roofline is quite high. And if you want to sit in the middle seat, that is reasonably comfortable, but there's not really anywhere to put your feet, so you're going to have to put them in the footwell next to you. And there's a USB socket and these pockets behind the seats, which I always really like, and 2 sets of Isofix. And before we move to the boot, there is another set of Isofix in the front passenger seat as well. The boot has 380 litres of space, which is the same as a Volkswagen Golf, and it's a practical, usable shape with barely any load lip, although it is worth noting that a Ford Puma and Volkswagen T-Cross both have about 456 litres of space. So it's a little bit smaller, but I definitely wouldn't describe it as small. It is a decent size. Before we take it for a drive, like, subscribe, click on the bell icon so that you catch all of our latest videos. 100 horsepower and a 1.2 turbocharged petrol engine doesn't sound particularly fast, but in reality it's actually quite a peppy engine. It is particularly responsive and willing around town, although acceleration does drop off a bit when you get onto the motorway. And if you need to overtake, which you probably won't in this car, then you'll probably need to knock it down a gear. And when I say overtake, I'm not talking about someone else driving at a normal road speed. I'm talking about maybe a tractor or a moped. The electric version is, as you might expect, rather more punchy, but it is 340 kilograms heavier than this petrol model, which takes the shine off that performance a touch. The EV version is of course an automatic, as is the mild hybrid, and actually if you go for either of those you'll be missing out on a smooth, precise manual. We've driven this combination of engine and gearbox in a variety of Peugeots, Citroëns and Vauxhalls, and Jeep's installation is, in our opinion, the best. As for the ride, well, it's perhaps not as soothing as a Citroën C3 Aircross, and there's a bit of jostling at lower speeds, but overall it's a very comfortable car. Motorway journeys will be at their most soothing when in the EV, but if you are in the petrol version, the engine noise is not too intrusive, which is good, and if you drive it carefully, expect around 50 miles per gallon. And that might be a little bit difficult when it is actually quite good fun to drive, so you'll have to exercise a little bit of self-discipline there. But if you really want something that is fun to drive and it's an SUV, then a Ford Puma is still better. Okay, I know we always go on about the Ford Puma, but it really is a good car. That said, if you're taken by the chunky, cute styling of the Avenger or are allured by the Jeep name, then you'll end up with a small SUV that's reasonably economical, practical to use every day and decent to drive. Just don't go replicating the D-Day landings.